So now we've discussed the MCR and the UN from the Expanse, but as many of you have pointed out, there's one major faction that we haven't discussed yet, and that is the Outer Planets Alliance. So today, let's talk about the OPA. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So before we begin, I want to get one thing out of the way. The OPA is definitely not one faction. It is a much larger thing than a single faction, but we will be basically giving an overview of what they all stand for in general. And that's where we're going to begin today. The OPA is not unified like any of these other factions. Unlike Earth and Mars, they don't operate like a single entity, at least not for much of the story of the Expanse. Instead, the OPA is made up of a bunch of smaller factions, each functioning like almost warlords or pirate groups. So what exactly is the OPA, or the Outer Planets Alliance? Well, the OPA is generally extra-governmental, being a bunch of civilian factions generally representing the people of the Belt and the Jovian moons and the moons of Saturn. Well, all of these factions seem to have different values and different ways that they stick up for the people they claim to represent. They all do have a few things in common, and one of the big ones is the notion that the Belt is sort of being abused by the rest of the system. They see the Belt contributing to the inner planets things like raw resources and getting nothing in return. This is something we see a lot in especially the earlier seasons of the TV show, where the OPA has almost taken on more of a terrorist group kind of image to the people of the inner planets. OPA factions regularly carrying out small minor hit-and-run attacks or bombings against UN and Martian facilities spread amongst the Belt. But it is noteworthy that the OPA doesn't really have firm territorial claims like any of the other factions in the system. You could look at the Martian Congressional Republic, for example, and say, well, they control Mars, Mars's moons, and a few scattered outposts across the system. However, if you look at the OPA, they just have a vague presence in a lot of the places in the system beyond the inner rim of the asteroid belt. That would be stations like Ceres, for example, which would eventually end up functioning as a de facto capital of the belt. But they were also present basically anywhere that far out in space. What about their military and their industry? What exactly is the OPA capable of? Well, not being a proper governmental institution, their industrial capability is kind of hard to pin down. They definitely have some capabilities. We know that there are shipbuilding facilities in the belt, and we know that those shipbuilding facilities do side with the OPA, a great example being Tycho Station. But beyond that, their production capabilities are questionable. We actually see this come into play a little bit when we're looking at Marco's Free Navy during the last season of The Expanse, where we can see them start to face supply shortages, especially with targeted attacks against their supply depots. And I actually mentioned during a video back during Season 6 of The Expanse that their lack of industrial capability would be one of the key hurdles that the Free Navy would have to overcome if they wanted any chance at victory. The OPA doesn't really have much of a formal military. During the course of their history, they would occasionally organize into something similar to a military, but it never really functioned fully like a military until the rise of the Free Navy. But throughout the course of that period of time, the OPA's navy, if you want to call it that, mainly remained the same. A lot of smaller ships, things like skiffs and what would be called rock hoppers, tiny ships for asteroid mining, that were retrofitted to function like small warships, small gunships. Basically, they would take civilian ships and strap PDCs to them. They'd mount torpedoes to the outside of the vessels, since a lot of these vessels didn't have internal torpedo launchers, for example, and almost no OPA vessels were capable of harboring railguns. But what you end up with is this sort of slapped-together fleet of civilian vessels with guns mounted to them. Something very, very sort of pirate-like. Which makes sense, because a lot of the OPA's naval capacity are really just pirate fleets serving a cause. And as I mentioned, a lot of that cause centers around the inner planets and their exploitation of the belt. And if you'd like to learn about Mars, one of the most militarily capable factions within the system, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I want you to let me know down in the comments whether you think some of the OPA's tactics are justified. Do you think the OPA is too fanatical in their sort of hatred of the inner planets, or do you think that seeing what they went through, it's entirely justified? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in The Expanse, leave it down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.